Now, today's presentation is on gratitude,
We're
gratitude of our beautiful state of California. And I would, at this time, like to really acknowledge and thank Suzanne for the joy that you bring to sharing art, artists, the insight that you have. Our minds have been expanded and we've never left our house. And you have shared so much with us. And
Thank you.
I think of Suzanne as a natural storyteller, and that really comes through when she's talking about these art. And you also can sense her enthusiasm for the artists and the stories of them, of their lives behind the artwork that they did.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Claudia. And thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it. And thank you all for indulging my passion, because I've really grown to love doing this. And you see, I'm a natural storyteller, but I'm a terrible joke teller. So I don't think I should be better at joke telling. Anyway, as Claudia mentioned, this month we're looking at gratitude, at art in gratitude. And I think we've said before that, I see gratitude as the art of being thankful and appreciating, what is valuable and meaningful to oneself. It's actually a very simple process of noticing and being thankful for the things around us. And one thing that is of value and meaningful to me specifically is nature. And nature opens our hearts and makes us realize that we are part of nature. We're not separate. And when we see ourselves in nature, it always also connects us to each other, because nature makes it clear that everything is connected in one. So nature has always been a great inspiration to artists, from the cave drawings of animals to the contemporary artists working today. And they've depicted nature as a setting to express their inner feelings, and forever changing that face of art. As the artist Vasily Kandinsky said, if the artist has outer and inner eyes for nature, nature rewards him by giving him inspiration. And that's what California's nature does. It inspires artists like no other. It has its majesties of the oceans and mountains and rivers and farmlands and the valleys and the redwoods. And it just provides an abundant way to appreciate and be inspired by nature. And I'm, for one, grateful that we can experience it on our own, and then also the art that they've done. So tonight, as we did last year, we invite you to journey with us and with me, and then later in a meditation with Claudia on the wonder of California's nature and abundance, and opening our hearts to gratitude and thankfulness. So I'd like to start this evening with a true California landscape. So we can go to the first slide. There we go. This is spring morning poppies and bush lupine. And it was painted by John Marshall Gamble. And like other artists we have discussed, Grenville Redmond, he was one of a group of California Impressionists who focused on the California landscapes and wildflowers. Gamble was a leading Impressionist, and he acquired a national reputation as a painter of California meadows and the hillsides that were just covered in wildflowers. Gamble was born in New Jersey, and he spent his teenage years in New Zealand. He came to San Francisco at age 20 to study art at the California School of Design. And then he continued his training in Paris at the Académie Julian. And then he came back to San Francisco in the early 1890s. He set up a studio. And then that studio was destroyed by the 1906 earthquake. And at that point, Gamble said, I'm moving to Santa Barbara. And he continued painting the state's poppies and lupine and buckwheat and ceanothus, which we know as wild lilac. And as we can see in this one, it was just, a combination of very complementary hues, which was a style and trademark of many of the Impressionists, is they use those complementary blues with the oranges or yellows that make each of those pop. He loved the poppies, and the poppy, which became California's state flower in 1903, was his favorite. He felt that it evoked the state's color and youthful energy and promise, which was what was going on at that point. This painting is in the hills east of Santa Barbara, and like his colleagues Granville and another colleague, William Jackson, and the Crocker has a number of those paintings from both from those artists. They sold to tourists who wanting to take a piece of the Golden State home with them. So he was successful, and by 1920, in the late 20s, he joined the faculty of the Santa Barbara School of Arts, and he taught drawing and landscape painting. And this is such a it's such a peaceful, calm, lovely work of a California impressionist. Especially, I know we focus on the poppies and the color and the ceanothus, which they call bush lupine. But the clouds are gorgeous. It's just a lovely rendition of clouds. Okay, and remember, folks, if you got comments or you have questions, you want to make a comment, please just unmute or just shout out. So let's go to our next one, Claudia. Now, some of you might recognize where this is. The name of it is called George W. Hoag's Record Wheat Harvest. It was painted in 1876 by an early California painter, Andrew Hill. He was best known for his photography, though. But more important, Andrew Hill was a leader in establishing the Big Basin Redwood State Park, which is in the Santa Cruz area. And that became the first Redwood State Park. He was born in Indiana, and he was hired to, or was commissioned by George Hoag to paint this particular piece. And as we said, what's so special is that it's the Sutter Buttes. And George Hoag had huge, thousands of acres of wheat farming. And he was an entrepreneur and a designer, and he wanted to improve agricultural productivity. And George Hoag was especially proud of his immense wheat separator, which you're seeing in there. It was steam operated. It was called the Monitor, and he helped design this. So in a contest of speed, Hoag's Monitor and a team of men easily beat out the competition at 3,500 sacks of wheat to the standing record of 2,400. So rather than have his portrait painted, you can see George Hoag in the foreground in the buggy with the horses, the handsome team of horses. So Andrew Hill, the artist, it's more primitive style. It's not a particularly, he wasn't trained as an artist, but he was a photographer. But this is such a piece of California history, especially during that time. There's probably rice fields there now. Claudia and I were talking earlier, and I think it's from the southern part of Colusa County, looking towards the Buttes, because the Hoag family was pretty well known in Colusa and Tehama counties.
I would say, Suzanne, you're actually north of the Buttes, more south of Richvale, maybe west of Gridley.
Okay, so that's what I was saying, but in the south part of Colusa County, right, Steve?
Well, south part of Butte County.
Okay.
If you look at that picture of the Buttes, the one on the far left is what they call North Butte.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at the buttes, you see that to the right.
Right. Okay. Well, that's what Claudia and I were thinking. It was north of the buttes, but I thought Colusa County. So they were in Colusa looking south.
Possibly, yeah.
Possibly, yeah. But it just looks like California in the summer. It just got that dry look, but it's a lovely painting. All right.
I just loved it though. Steve, I thought of you when she showed this to me the first time, because Steve's a rice farmer. Of course, this is wheat. And gosh, now mostly what they do is winter wheat. So would they still be harvesting around this time of year, Steve, that it looks like the spring?
Sorry, I unmuted. I mean,
Yeah, no.
muted. Well, yeah, I mean, it could be. It could be spring, early summer. It's hard to say.
Yeah. It doesn't say when it was painted. It just says the year, which was this was painted in 1876.
I love
Okay.
the style.
Oh, beg your pardon?
I love the style.
Yeah, the style. It is that. It's kind of, they call it a more primitive style. It's a flat style. It doesn't have huge amounts of dimension to it, but it works. You get the picture.
And I love I love the use of red. It really kind of pops in that bland gray, gray, gold, black tones. It's just a fun painting. I mean, it's just sweet.
It's actually kind of it's a good size. It's about 3 by 4 feet, so it's a pretty good size painting.
What I find really interesting about this painting is the proportion of the sky to the land. He's got everything like compacted in the bottom third of the picture, and then you have this huge expanse of blue.
Yeah, that's a good point, Patricia. But isn't that how you feel when you stand out there in the field, is that the sky is immense? I always feel so tiny standing out in the when I'm in the Central Valley, especially up in your area. Just standing there and just the sky is 2/3 of my view with more. So yeah, interesting perspective. Good points. All right, let's go to our next one. And this is, I don't know if many of you recognize it, but this is Clear Lake. And the steamer in the mid part of the painting is called the City of Lakeport. And this was painted by one of California's foremost 19th century marine painters, Gideon Jacques Denny. And he's best known really for his paintings of ships and the scenes of San Francisco's commercial harbor. Denny was born in Delaware, where he learned sailing. I guess a lot of them did when they were young. But what I thought was interesting with Denny is he moved to California from Milwaukee with his family as part of the gold rush in 1849. So they came by wagon. In San Francisco, he worked as a teamster along the waterfront for 2 years, and then he returned to Milwaukee to study art and with a portrait painter, Samuel Brooks. And in late 1850s, Denny returned to California and he established himself as a painter. And he was very active in the arts organization until he died actually quite young. At 56, he died of malaria. He just had an incredible enthusiasm for all things maritime. And in this painting, it's really evident that that he really loved ships. And Clear Lake is many of you might know, is the largest natural lake that's entirely in California. And the City of Lakeport, which is the steamer, launched in 1874. It ran daily between Lakeport and Lower Lake until the early 1900s, and then its route was changed, and then it was stopped altogether. But what I love about this piece is that it really is a tranquil mood, and there's a horizontality, I guess. It's horizontal to this composition. And so it's very similar to a lot of the East Coast marine painters who call themselves luminist. And we've talked about that before, where the sky and the reflection of the water, it's very light filled. So we can't see it in here, but in the painting, the steamer is very detailed. It's really, really detailed. But it's just such a snapshot of Clear Lake, and Clear Lake really looks like this still today. I mean, yeah, there's little houses along it, but the hills around it, there's some development, but not a lot. And so it's a very shallow lake, and interestingly, quite large. So it's just this snapshot in time of Clear Lake, and the steamship that ran back and forth between the Lakeport, which was in the northern part of the lake, to the lower lake, which is in the south part. Just a lovely, lovely piece. All right. Any comments or questions on that little puppy?
Okay.
Well, what kind of a trip? What's the width? I mean, that he would be that you would need a whole steamship.
You know, Lillian, that's a good question, but I think Clear Lake is, I think, 20 miles long. I think it's quite a large,
Ooh.
it's when you come in from on Highway 20 to Clear Lake at the bottom, Clear Lake Oaks is the town, to all the way up to Lakeport, I think it's about 20 miles straight,
Oh my
straight
God.
shot up. I know I could be wrong. It may be, but it's quite a large lake.
Yeah.
So I'd have to look. That's a good question, though. But part of it was faster probably to go that than trying to make its way around. And even today, there's only one road that goes around.
And that
Clear Lake.
the road is very crooked.
It's crooked and it's 2-lane, and
Right.
it takes a long time, even now, for you to drive it. So it probably was faster, especially at that time when you had to go by horse and carriage, horse and buggy,
Yeah.
and probably made the trip in less than a day, of course.
Well, here you go. Thank you, Dr. Google. Clear
Okay,
Lake
cool.
is 19 miles by 8 miles.
Okay, I was close, 20.
And you sure were the font of wisdom over there.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a very serene picture.
yeah, it is. And that's how Clear Lake is. It's a very, very calm lake. And this color too, because of its shallowness, it doesn't give any, once in a while you get a blue cast on it, but mostly it's this kind of muted gray blue color. All right, let's head south a little bit. Not too far. We're going to go to Monterey.
Isn't that spectacular?
This is the Cactus Garden at the Hotel Del Monte. And this was painted in the early 1890s by a woman artist, Evelyn McCormick. And this is one of her earlier paintings. And she had gone to study in Giverny and was very, with Monet, Monet's garden, and was very inspired by the Impressionists, came back and painted this piece, the Cactus Garden. Now, first, I would never have plunked down a cactus garden in Monterey. It doesn't, you know, don't ask me why it was planted there. I don't know how long it lasted.
It was there when, yeah, they used to have concerts on the lawn there, and I remember it being that, you know, part of that cactus garden still there.
Who would have thunk it? But you know, it seemed to be thriving, and so she was, as I said, very influenced by the Impressionists, the yellows and the greens, and this blue kind of dominate, and it's really enriched by purple shadows. There's no black. There's no black in this painting at all, and that's a trademark of the Impressionists. They did not use black. They didn't believe black was a natural color, so they would use dark purples. Not that they wouldn't mix black into darken things, but they wouldn't use straight black onto the canvas. Interesting that Evelyn McCormick was born in Placerville, which is in the Sierra foothills. She was raised in San Francisco, and she attended, let's say it all together, the California School of Design before she, let's say it all together, traveled to Paris to the Académie Julian with a fellow artist, Guy Rose. And we've seen Guy Rose's work before. Guy Rose is a fabulous Impressionist painter. He bought a cottage next to Monet and Giverny, and lived there for many years, painting and studying, and became friends with Claude Monet. He and his wife did that, and then he also then returned to the United States. But he painted a lot in Southern California. So when Evelyn then returned to California in early 1890s, she was really one of the first to apply these Impressionist strategies to California landscapes. And they call this garden, it's called the Cactus Garden, but they called it the Arizona Gardens. And it was designed by actually a well-known landscape architect, designer, Rudolf Ulrich. And it was designed, as we've mentioned, in 1881 for the Hotel Del Monte in Monterey. And Lillian, you said you went to concerts there at the Hotel Del Monte?
Well, now it's the Navy Postgraduate School.
That's right.
And they would have, like 4th of July and another time of the year, they would have the local, symphony. And the people would bring their lunch or whatever, and spread blankets on the lawn. It's really, really was a wonderful event.
Oh, that's great. I don't know you. I know that you go to the Monterey Art Gallery, the Art Museum there. They must have some Evelyn McCormick, because she was a really important and early member of the Monterey Peninsula Art Colony. And she spent much of her career depicting the region's architecture and scenery. This one actually has brush strokes that are more tiny than as she got older and her work matured. The brush strokes became more broad, a little more active. But she always retained these solid forms. And what I mean by that is a lot of the Impressionists were very shape-filled and light, and the edges were blurred. And Evelyn wasn't that far. She actually had a little more detail in hers, but still in that same Impressionist mode.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's gosh, I wonder if Lillian, that's your mission, is to find if that Cactus Garden is still there.
Okay.
Okay, then report back. All right, let's go.
Great assignment, Lillian.
Yeah, it's going to be a hard assignment. Take a bottle of wine. Okay.
But let me just ask, Lillian, can you get in there without or is it restricted?
I have no idea. I only went when they had a concert, which was several times, but I mean, so I'll have to check it out. I think they have I think you can go and eat there at the school. They have a big dining room and all, so maybe you can.
Okay, field trip.
Okay. Y'all come down, we go together.
Okay.
But this artist is extremely precise and beautiful. I mean, I can't believe how she did this painting. I mean, it is So precise,
know.
beautiful.
It is. And you know, Carol, it's a little more photorealistic in this in this because it's a smaller version. When you see the actual one, it's a little less it's less the edges are not as rigid as a detail. But you're right. And that was her signature, is that even as an impressionist, she didn't go for the impression of something. She was more detailed. She kept her forms pretty solid.
It's almost like a photograph.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. And for
Yeah.
an impressionist, it's very realistic and lifelike.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
What I was telling Suzanne, when she was showing this to me, it's like, oh, what a life! Wow, wow, wow! I mean, she was born in Placerville, moved to San Francisco, went to Paris to study, and look at the date that she died. I mean, she was born. She was, she was.
1862. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a civil war was going on, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And you'll find that most of the women painters remained single. They did not marry. Some married, but most of them remained single, and that allowed them the freedom to move as they wanted to enhance their art and to continue to educate themselves. So, and go to different places. All right, let's go to the next one. And this piece and the next one after it are studies of the same thing, are paintings of the same things. So
Hang on here.
all right,
There we go.
there you go. Okay, and that means that both of this painting and the next one are portraits of cypress trees. And this one is done by Mary Denagle Morgan, and she had a long association with Carmel by the Sea in the early 20th century, and it lasted for 45 years. She fell in love with that area. She stayed there until she died. She found the Monterey Peninsula very rich and varied enough to sustain her creative energies throughout the better part of her career. And, she seldom looked elsewhere for subject matter. She grew up in Oakland, close to the landscape painter William Keith. And we have seen a William Keith before. The Crocker has a number of William Keith, a beautiful landscape painter. And he encouraged her interest in art. And she studied at, let's say it together, the California School of Design in San Francisco. And she kind of didn't go straight through. She went back and forth with it for about 8 years. So she'd study for a couple of years, she'd stop, she'd go back for a year, she'd stop. But she opened her studio in Oakland and then began making regular visits to Monterey, early 1900s. And by 1910, she had moved there permanently because she just fell in love with the coastal pines and the cypress. And her early works were in tempera and watercolor, which is a very challenging medium to work in. You have to work, it's very precise. It just is it's not forgiving. It's a not forgiving medium. So, but by 1920, she started working in oils. And like her counterpart from that area, E. Carlton Fortune, who we have seen paintings of, Morgan was a very popular figure in Carmel and a charter member of the Carmel Art Association. She was referred as the Dean of Women Painters and was selected by the Scribner's Magazine, which was the art magazine at the time, as one of the nation's foremost female artists. So this is just an absolutely charming piece, very much in the Impressionist style. And remember, we've talked about the Impressionists, is that they looked for light and shadow. That was, and the moment. That was what they were looking for, it was in that moment in time. And they worked usually very quickly, especially if they were working outside. And this is just an incredible study of light and shadow. And in that moment, they said you had to feel the art. And I think if you can feel standing there in this grove of cypress trees, just you know that the ocean is right there. You can see it. You know the wind is blowing. You can probably smell it, and it's just a captured moment of time. And something very unique, I think, into California are those are the cypress and the pines on the coast. I think it's a very unique feature of of the Monterey area.
Especially the shape of them, because they're
Yeah.
so windswept.
That's right.
Wind-formed.
Yeah, exactly, Claudia. All right, let's go to another look at cypress. This is very different. Also, both of the ones we saw were untitled. This one's called Untitled Old Cypress Monterey. This was painted in the late 1890s by Amédée Jullien. And he was born in San Francisco. His parents were French. And he studied at the California School of Design in San Francisco. And
There's
then,
another field trip we ought to do.
yeah. And then privately he took lessons under a fellow Frenchman, Jules Tavernier, and who we also have paintings of in the Crocker, and is very well known for a lot of Marin paintings. He painted a lot in the Marin area. So then he also went to Paris and trained. And when he returned to California in mid-1880s, he painted a lot of Chinatown scenes and landscapes. And then he also later in life did a lot of Native American life and culture. But by the mid-1880s, California's sand dunes became one of Amédée Jullien's favorite subjects. He traveled up the coast and down the coast from Santa Barbara to San Francisco. He made careful studies of the sands, of the dunes, and he later adapted those studies to larger oils. He said that he gave in an interview in the mid-1890s, he said that I am examining the sand all around the city, and I am becoming more and more impressed with the particular color relation, the beautiful harmonies that exist between the sagebrush and the sand it grows upon. And he, in this one, obviously depicts his passion and love for the sand. And I think he captured it brilliantly, because that is the color of the sand in Monterey. And the old cypress tree, dead cypress tree, and then the other ones surrounding it. It just is, it's a lovely, lovely piece.
Really?
Really? You don't like it? You don't like it, Lil?
I just don't like looking at that dead tree.
I think it's such an interesting shape. I think the study of the shape of it is so fascinating, and that he would have picked that. He would have picked that. But you know, that's part of the whole coast too, or the dead cypress.
Or the ones that are gnarly without many green branches on it.
Yeah, that's true.
Still living, but barely.
This could be still living, just barely. Anyway, let's continue to down the California coast. And this is by the artist Edgar Alwyn Payne. Cocker also has a number of his. He is also very well known in the California Impressionist group. He did something very. He summed up his art by saying, "At the basis of all things, there is energy, activity, or power. Call it what you will, that is produced between opposing forces." And it is certainly that in this really mighty painting of the Rocky. This is the Laguna Beach coast. So it's in
Oh.
Southern California. It could be
Oh.
Northern California too.
Easy, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, it does fall directly into Impressionism. But what Payne did so interesting is he had used very vigorous and active brushstrokes of that style, making it more impressionist. But it really is kind of a departure from the usual, you get quiet and almost genteel refinement of most of the impressionist painters, those soft pastel colors, the gentle scenes, the landscapes, you don't really see this violent, seething landscape in an impressionist. But that's what called to California, the impressionists that came to California, was the coastline, was so dramatic, and they loved it. And I love this piece here. I mean, the part of it where, the water is that greenish
Yeah.
color that's just coming in, or it's crashed upon the rocks and it's going back out. It is that color. It's that color.
Yeah.
It's so amazing and so beautiful. And again, he's captured that moment, and you know what time of day it is too. It's sunset. So it's a gorgeous, gorgeous piece. And a nice size. It's almost 3 feet by 4, almost 4 feet, not quite 3.5 feet.
He's a master of foam.
A master of foam. I was reading somebody, I can't remember who said it. Gosh, it was a famous artist that says, painting is easy when you don't know how, but it's really hard when you do. And I thought, well, that about sums it all up, doesn't it? A little bit about Payne. He was born in Missouri. He traveled the U.S. and Mexico. He earned money by painting houses. He painted signs, stage sets, and he later was employed to produce some murals throughout the Midwest. He was self-taught because he only studied for 2 weeks at the Art Institute of Chicago. So he really didn't have a formal education of art. But man, oh man, did he have some talent. He came to California early 1900s, and he spent time in Laguna Beach and then San Francisco, where he met his future wife, Elsie Palmer, who was a painter also. They then settled in Glendale, and then they built a home and a studio in Laguna Beach and became founding members of the Laguna Beach Art Association. He lived there till he passed. So, but for somebody who doesn't have any formal training, I'll take his piece any day.
Amazing.
It is just, it seethes with motion. It's just seething with motion.
Suzanne,
Yeah.
do you know
Lynn?
what ND in the title means?
It means no date.
Oh,
We don't know when he painted it. They can guess when he painted it, but he didn't date it. So anytime you see an ND, whether it's capitalized or smaller case, it means there's no date on it.
okay.
Thank you, though, for pointing that out.
We all learned something.
Okay, let's move on to our next. And, oh gosh, you gotta love this piece. It's by SC1. The artist was born in China. He studied at the Fine Arts Academy in Nanking, and he practiced Western painting styles, not standard Asian styles, which was taught there. So he kind of went against the current. And then he also worked in oil paint instead of the traditional inks. So he was kind of the black sheep probably of the class that he was in studying and learning the trade. But by the time he graduated, China was in turmoil, and he was caught between the nationalist and communist parties. And for a time, one worked as a artist producing political propaganda for the Nationalist Party. But when the Communist Party gained control in 1949, he saw the light and he left. And then he came to the United States, and the following year he became a citizen. But again, as many artists were, he was seduced by Monterey's dramatic coast, and he moved there in 1951. He married a couple of years later, and then the following year, his daughter Ray was born. And the reason I bring that up is because he did a portrait of Ray, R-A-E, that is in the Crocker, and it is stunning. She's maybe 11, 12 years old, and it is a gorgeous piece. He did a wide range of subjects. He painted portraits and still lifes and landscapes and seascapes. And he starting to experiment with kind of non-representational abstraction. So he started moving into that abstract expression himself. He was a very fast painter, that's what I've read, and he painted with a lot of energy, and he used very broad strokes. So you can see it in there on how quickly he slathered and put the paint onto the canvas, and how he quickly moved it. But what he did so beautifully is that he would paint a monochromatic of the sand and then the pop of blue ocean with this pop of yellow, so that again the complementary color, so they pop each other, and of course a little bit of red, and it makes me happy looking at this. It's just very joyful, as you know, he captures these strollers enjoying the famous beach. I would guess that this is maybe Carmel, but I'm not sure. I'm looking around the coast. It looks like it's Pebble Beach towards the top area, but it's just very happy. It's a very happy painting for me. Okay. Any comment, question? Okay, let's go to our next one.
I have to leave. Something came up and I have to leave.
All right, Carol, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. This has been so delightful. I will be back.
Okay, good.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Carol, good
All
to
right,
see you.
bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye. This particular piece was painted by Marion Cavanaugh Wechtel, and it's called In the Shadow of the Mountains, and it's Mount Whitney. And this is painted from the east side of the Sierra, from Lone Pine, small town of Lone Pine. And Marion studied at the Art Institute in Chicago and New York, and she taught art at the Chicago Art Institute. She was really an adventurer, and she came alone to California to paint for the Santa Fe Railroad, and she arrived in San Francisco in 1903. Her teacher, William Keith, who we just had heard about, suggested Elmer Wechtel as a possible Southern California teacher, because she was interested in going to Southern California. He not only became her teacher, but he became her husband. So they were married a couple of years later. They lived in LA for many years, and then moved to the Arroyo Seco area of Pasadena. And we've seen some paintings of that previously in some other presentations, but that's where the Rose Bowl is, that Arroyo Seco area. The Wechtels, you know, traveled throughout Southern California. They loved the inland valleys, so they painted the mountains and the coast. Elmer worked in oils, and Marion worked in watercolors because her husband was working in oils and she did not want to compete with him. So she did her work in watercolors. Their work tended to be kind of more tonal or not a lot of color. They were subdued colors. And then as they started painting more and more, the colors, you can kind of see as they shifted to more higher intensities in their later works. So when her husband died in 1929, Marion then shifted to oils. And and then she turned back towards those more pastel shades that she was working in, but she was doing it in oils. And this is a later piece of hers in oil, and it is stunning. It almost looks like a watercolor. It's so beautifully rendered, and she was a master. Her husband's work was equally as fine. I mean, he did beautiful, beautiful work, and the Crocker has a number of their pieces in the California Impressionist section. So I just, it's subdued, but it's still so majestic. And this is how the Sierra looks from the east side. They rise up this straight up. There's nothing gentle about them. And you get this really small foothill in front, and then this majestic uprising of the Sierra. And then the high desert in the foreground with the sage. It's just a gorgeous rendering. All right. Let's move to our next one, Claudia. Here we go. I bet you all recognize this, the artist.
Oh, Halfdome.
Yeah, you know, books have been written about Ansel Adams, so there's not really much I can add, but I do want to mention that, you know, he was born in the San Francisco Fillmore district, and he was a gifted piano player. He actually thought about becoming a professional pianist with an interest in art, but he kind of he thought he wasn't good enough, and then started to pursue his passion in photography. We know him as a lifelong advocate for environmental conservation, and his photographic practice was deeply entwined with this advocacy. He was given his first camera when he was 12, when he had made his trip to Yosemite. And then he started doing photographs and then working as a member of the Sierra Club. And then he was later contracted with the United States Department of the Interior to make photographs of national parks. So a lot of his work was owned by the US government, and he could not sell it, but there were pieces, and he started going out on his own, that he was not under contract to the government at the time. And he was able to make copies and sell his work. But I really want to focus on this piece because it is, I know we've all seen it. It's a stunning, stunning piece. It's called Monolith, the Face of Half Dome. And it was done in 1927. And he used glass plates of this camera. And what was so intriguing about this is he used a dark red filter. And when you use a dark red filter, what that does is darken the sky, the blue sky, and it produces these incredibly deep shadows and bright light. So it heightens those tonal contrasts. And that's what he was a master at. This particular negative, they had done a long trek up the ridge that faces Half Dome. And when he got to this part, he said, this is this place I want to take it. And it was the last image that he made during that trek in April 1927. He had only one plate left. And he said what he did was he visualized the effect of the blackened sky before risking using this last image. He said, I had been able to realize a desired image, not the way the subject appeared in reality, but how it felt to me and how it must appear in the finished print. So that, this is the culmination of that. And, many have called this the Monolith Adams's most significant photograph because of how he manipulated the tonal values. And it really was a departure from all previous photography. He was a master at this, and it was a core principle of his photography. And what's also interesting about this print is that there were two sizes that were done. At the time he did this one, he made a contact prints where they actually use the glass plate that's contacted onto the paper, light on it, and then it's developed. And they were the size of the plates. So the firsts were about 8 by 11. And then when larger enlargers were available, he began printing these sizes in about 16 by 20 size. So there's kind of, and that was in the 70s. So they're both originals, but they're both originals from different ways. So he was able to use the glass negative and enlarge it. And this particular print is 19 by 14. So not quite the 16 by 20, but close to it. And he felt that when able to enlarge it, he said that it could convey more fully Yosemite's grandness when you can make them larger like that. He died in Monterey, and at his request, he was cremated, and then his ashes were scattered on Half Dome. So I don't think he got the park's permission, but maybe he did. I don't know. What are they going to do?
Dan,
Yeah. Yes.
I understand that, you know, his image of the moon over the valley. It's really
Sunrise over in New Mexico, sunrise over, moonrise over, and it's in New Mexico. Is that what the one you were thinking of?
really low, very horizontal, low range. The moon hangs there in the sky, and he manipulated that one, the tonal values, quite a bit as well.
Yeah, he manipulated most of his prints.
But this one he manipulated the most, you were saying?
I don't know if it's the most, but he the way he did manipulate, they call it the most significant portrait because of how he did manipulate those colors. Yeah, moon, I guess it's called Moonrise over New Mexico. No, what it's one of those, but
Remember the
very
name.
famous one.
Remember, I think it was him talking about how he did it.
Yeah, he's amazing photographer. The ones that you've also seen, the highest selling that I have read about, and it could be, this was a little bit ago, were the Grand Tetons, that he's done the Grand Tetons. And that sold at Sotheby's for almost $1 million for one print. So they're worth something. You can still buy them today. There's a lot of prints. They're not necessarily an original. There's ways that you can tell. Yeah. But if you have an original, it can run anywhere from like $4,000 to $70,000, depending on what the subject matter is when he printed it. But, yeah, he was really phenomenal. And I was telling Claudia, in the 70s, if you were called yourself an environmentalist and you didn't have an Ansel Adams calendar, you were not an environmentalist. All right, let's go to our next one. Okay. This lovely little piece is called The Hanson's Dairy. Is done by Maynard Sheets. He was born in Pomona, and he graduated from Pomona High School, and then he enrolled in the Chouinard Art School in Los Angeles. He didn't come to San Francisco and study. He stayed in LA.
Yeah.
And his instructor suggested that he work in watercolor. The Sheets later taught at Chouinard and then at Scripps College in Claremont. And after leaving Scripps in 1954, he became director of the Los Angeles County Art Institute. And then in the 60s, he moved to Mendocino Coast. And then he built his dream home at Barking Rocks in Gualala, which is still there. The home is still there. It's owned, the private home. But Barking Rocks, you can go, Barking Rocks is still there. So you can see the Barking Rocks. This particular piece, it's done in oil, but it looks so much like a watercolor. And I think that, he used oils like a watercolor. And this is a farm near Claremont, and it just has this very loose, fluid approach to the oil painting, which reminds me so much of that watercolor technique. Charming piece.
Very
Ah,
charming.
it is. All right, let's go to our last piece. And one of our, there it is. Okay. As soon as I say Gregory Condos, you're gonna you know his work. I mean, his work is so stylized and so prevalent in this area. I've spoken of him before. He is known for this buttery spread. That's the only way I can consider it. Buttery spread of bright, warm color. That's what it reminds me of. And his canvases are thickly painted. And when you stand in front of this masterpiece, I mean, it's just this sun-warmed expanses. You get summer sky, and you get the water, and you get the vineyards. And so, you know, his Condos's compositions are balanced, you know, kind of not to only express the tranquility of the scene, but also the how he got so much pleasure with nature. I mean, you just feel he loved nature, and we can see this communion that he had with nature in this monumental piece. It's called Rutherford Vineyard, and it's a canvas of more than 7 square feet, so 7 by 7 feet square. It is a big piece. And when you stand in front of it, you feel like you're standing in the vineyard. He spent much of his time in 1989 in Sonoma and Napa. And he culminated the series that he was painting there with this particular piece. And, you know, the subjects of this painting are the grapevines and the shadows. That's really important, is that he painted the grapevines, but the shadows are also equally as important, and they take up as much space as the vineyards do. You know, the leaves are kind of rendered very higgledy-piggledy. They're almost like calligraphy, how he puts them in. But they are a pure, saturated color. They didn't do a huge amount of blending. It's just that pure color that's put onto the canvas. You know, as I was saying, you stand in front of the posts and the vines. They're almost life size. So you're standing right in there, right in there, and then your eye slowly moves up that small path to the horizon, where you get his really traditionally and stylized trees, which you see on many of his paintings of the Sacramento Valley, the river, the Delta. That's a very, very unique way that he portrays the trees. But it is a gorgeous, gorgeous piece. And sadly, Condos died this year. He died last month. And lived a long and fruitful life, 98. And he painted every day, just like Wayne Thiebaud, who turned 101 this month, this last day of November. He paints every day.
Wow.
And pretty amazing. So I hope you enjoyed our tour. And
great.
this feeling of gratefulness, and you know, art allows us to open up ourselves. We can go inward. It gives us a sense of creating calm or healing or wonder, or actually connecting with nature, which is the divine. So what I invite you to do is to go out to nature tomorrow. It's been gorgeous where we are, and just be. And if you're in a museum, stay a while in front of a piece of art that calls to you, and soak it in, and just allow gratefulness to bubble up. And Claudia, I think we're ready for our meditation.
All right. I'm going to mute everyone. so that we can just have this experience in the quiet. And when I saw this very first slide, I knew that this was the one. So as we move into our meditation, we'll focus on this beautiful painting by John Marshall Gamble of a morning spring. As you sit comfortably, I invite you to relax your whole body. If you'd like, you can softly close your eyes, or you can focus on this picture with just soft eyes. Now scan your body and see if you're holding any tension in your body. And then breathe into those areas. And just tell them with the next breath, relax. Maybe focus on your shoulders. Relax, or your upper legs. And now let's just breathe and relax even further. Breathing in to a count of 4 or 5. Hold. And then release your breath to a count of 8 or 10. And breathe in again. And release. If thoughts distract you in your breathing count, just mentally say, thinking, and go back to your breath and count. Imagine yourself sitting or maybe lying down in this beautiful field of poppies. Can you visualize a small, soft breeze on your face? Can you feel the warm ground as you lay there or sit there? As you gaze into the blue sky, can you find shapes in the puffy, billowing clouds? And now, I invite you to release the day. Our days can be so hectic. We wear so many hats. We hustle around with our to-do list, maybe doing things for others. But right now, I invite you to relax and remember who you are, who you really are. I invite you to move your focus to your heart, maybe pressing gently on it with your hand. Reminding yourself, I am strong. I am courageous. It takes courage to live our lives today in these complicating times. Yes, you have faced challenges. And you've surpassed what some thought you could never achieve. You're an overcomer. Some things have been difficult, but no one said life would be easy. And regardless, you overcame it. And now, move your focus to your heart. And with your next breath, breathe into tenderness and compassion. Breathe out love and gratitude. Breathe in tenderness and compassion. And breathe out love and gratitude. Breathe in tenderness and compassion. Maybe it's time to forgive yourself for the times that you fell below the mark. I'm sure something comes to mind. We keep our own ledger of our foibles and our faults, our missteps. We keep it right at the front of our mind where we can access it easily. But maybe it's time to toss that book out. Maybe it's time to rip up those pages. That's not who you are. Not who you really are. You forgive others. Maybe it's time to extend that same compassion and forgiveness to yourself. Maybe it's time to celebrate your true self. You are strength. You are love. And with love and with strength, you can do all things. We can endure and do much more than we ever thought we could. Rest in that forgiveness of yourself. Release any doubts and know you are loved. Namaste, my friends. And now, as you gently bring yourself back into our space, thank you so much for joining us. This would have been not nearly as much fun without you. So if you will unmute yourself, Suzanne will share one more slide.
Oh, all righty. Thank you, Claudia.
Here we go.
All right. So these are the shows that are at the Crocker right now. And we have Hands in Earth with the contemporary Japanese ceramics. And some of those pieces are absolutely stunning. We have the Monet to Matisse, which last month we actually did a tour of on Zoom. Towns, Trains, and Terrains. This is not one that is everybody's cup of tea, but I find this so exciting. It's etchings and lithographs from a private collection, and they are mostly of the Monterey area and San Francisco. And if you are, if you love aerial views of things and buildings, maps, this is one for you. There's actually in one of these a map from 1606 by of the Western Hemisphere by a Dutch cartographer. Stunning, absolutely stunning. And then the show that just opened was Stephen de Stabler, and there's a series of masks and that is done with clay, and then there's also in the courtyard statues. So it is one that is very visceral. I mean, you get there and it's taking me a while to get used to this. And I'll see it tomorrow again because I'm doing a Monet tour for a group. And I'm going to go back and stand in front of these statues and see if I can get a different feel. So thank you. And if you're in town or you want a tour, let me know. Anytime. The Crocker's open Wednesday through Sunday.